On the evening of October 21st, 1981, the sea near Vladivostok looks deceptively calm. The water of the Golden Horn Bay is smooth, a dark mirror reflecting the scattered lights of the city and the stars above. To a casual observer standing on the shore, the scene is one of peaceful industry. Fishing boats returning with their catch, merchant ships idling their engines as they wait for pilots, and the distant rhythmic flash of navigation buoys. Nothing in the atmosphere suggests violence. The wind is light, the visibility is decent, and the temperature is a crisp autumn chill typical of the Russian Far East. It is the kind of night where the routines of maritime life seem unbreakable, where the schedules of arrival and departure feel as solid as the concrete piers of the harbor. Yet, just beneath the surface, a tragedy is taking shape with the cold inevitability of physics. A steel coffin is moving through the dark water, carrying 59 men who believe they are minutes away from safety. They are not at war. There is no enemy fleet hunting them. There are no mines in the water. They are home. But the ocean does not care about geography, and it certainly does not care about the false sense of security that comes with seeing the lights of your home port. Within the next hour, this calm surface will be broken by a catastrophic violence. A Soviet submarine, hardened by decades of Cold War service and crewed by experienced sailors, will be torn open. It will be flooded. It will be dragged down to the seabed in a screaming tangle of twisted metal and freezing water. By the time the sun rises over Vladivostok the next morning, more than half of its crew will be dead. They will not die in combat, earning medals for their bravery against a foreign power. They will die because of a collision. They will die because of confusion. They will die because of silence. And most hauntingly, they will die because the system they serve, a system built on rigid hierarchy and absolute secrecy, will fail them at the exact moment they need it most. This is the story of diesel-electric submarine S-178. But more than that, it is the story of how people survive and how they die inside a closed system that cannot admit its own mistakes. It is a story about the fragility of life when it is enclosed in steel, and the terrifying speed with which a normal Tuesday night can turn into a struggle for air. In the early 1980s, Vladivostok is not just a port city, it is a fortress. It is the headquarters of the Soviet Pacific Fleet, a closed city in the strictest sense of the term. Foreigners are forbidden from entering. Even Soviet citizens need special permits to live or visit here. The city exists to serve the Navy. Every street, every pier, every warehouse is part of the military machine. The waters surrounding the city are theoretically under the tightest control in the world. This is the doorstep of a nuclear superpower. Radar stations sweep the horizon constantly. Patrol boats monitor the traffic. Every movement at sea, from the smallest fishing trawler to the largest cruiser, is supposed to pass through layers of military authority and authorization. At least that is the theory. That is what the maps say. That's what the regulations in the heavy, bound books on the admirals' desks say. In practice, however, the reality is messier. The waters of the Golden Horn are crowded. Military vessels share the lanes with civilian ships, fishing trawlers, and cargo freighters. The coordination between the military dispatchers and the civilian port authorities is often slow, reliant on radio calls that can be missed or misunderstood. The regulations are outdated, written for a smaller navy and a smaller merchant fleet. And then there is the human factor. Complacency is the silent killer of the sea. When you sail the same route 100 times, you stop looking at the chart. When you enter the same harbor every week, you stop checking the radar. The strict discipline of the closed city creates a paradox. Because everyone assumes the area is secure, everyone relaxes. The guards stop watching the gate because they believe the wall is high enough. It was here, in this intersection of high security and human error, that S-178 had been based for years. The submarine was a familiar sight to the locals, just another gray shape slipping in and out of the fog. S-178 was not a new, experimental vessel. It was a workhorse. Built in 1954, it belonged to Project 613, known to NATO as the Whiskey class. This was the most mass-produced submarine design in Soviet history, with over 215 units built. They were the T-34 tanks of the ocean, rugged, simple, and reliable. The design was not luxurious, but it was robust. S-178 was 76 meters long, displacing about 1,300 tons submerged. It could travel at 18 knots on the surface using its diesel engines and 13 knots submerged on its electric motors. Its maximum diving depth was 180 meters. shallow by modern standards, but deep enough to crush a human body instantly. Inside, the hull was divided into 7 watertight compartments. This compartmentalization was the submarine's primary defense against flooding. If one section breached, the heavy steel doors could be sealed, isolating the damage and keeping the rest of the ship afloat. In theory, for 25 years, S-178 had served the Pacific Fleet without major disaster. Like any old ship, it had its scars. It had been trapped in ice once, it had been damaged in a storm, but each time it was repaired, painted, and returned to duty. The crew trusted it. It was a known quantity. It didn't have the temperamental nuclear reactors of the newer classes. It didn't have complex electronics that failed constantly. It was simple steel and diesel. Nothing about S-178 suggested catastrophe. It was a survivor. And that is precisely why the catastrophe, when it came, was so shattering. We expect experimental planes to crash. We expect new technology to fail. We do not expect the old, reliable bus to drive off the cliff. The evening of October 21st begins with a sense of relief. S-178 is returning from a short 2-day mission in the training ranges outside the harbor. The task had been routine, almost boring. They had been acting as a target and escort for another submarine conducting deep dive trials. They had spent hours measuring acoustic signatures, running back and forth in designated boxes of ocean. Now, the work is done. The submarine is traveling on the surface, its diesels thrumming rhythmically, pushing it toward the lights of Vladivostok. Inside the hull, the mood is relaxed. It is dinner time. The smell of food wafts through the narrow corridors, mixing with the permanent scent of oil and battery acid. In a breach of strict protocol, but a common practice on returning boats, several internal watertight doors are left open. It makes moving between compartments easier for the crew carrying trays of food. It facilitates ventilation. It is a convenience that the crew has likely indulged in dozens of times before without consequence. There are 59 men on board. They are a mix of officers, midshipmen, and conscript sailors. The conscripts are young, mostly in their early 20s, counting the days until their mandatory service ends. The officers are career men, looking forward to a night at home with their families. 12 sailors, including the captain, Lieutenant Commander Marigo, are standing on the bridge, the small open-air platform at the top of the conning tower. The wind is cold, but it feels good after 2 days of breathing recycled air. They are smoking cigarettes, watching the coastline draw closer. They can see the navigational lights of the harbor entrance. They are minutes away from the pier. At 19:30, the radio operator receives the signal everyone has been waiting for. S-178, you are cleared to enter port. The captain acknowledges. He orders a course change to line up with the entrance channel. He checks his watch. He is thinking about the docking procedure, about the post-mission report, about dinner. Almost simultaneously, just a few miles away inside the harbor, another radio operator receives a different signal. Another vessel is cleared to leave. The stage is set. 2 ships are moving toward the same point in space and time. One is a weapon of war, designed to be invisible. The other is a refrigerator, designed to be profitable. And in the gap between their orders, the system has left a fatal blind spot. The silence above Vladivostok is about to be broken. The vessel moving out of the harbor to meet the submarine is not a warship. It is the Refrigerator 13, a large refrigerated cargo ship belonging to the local fishing fleet. It is a hulking, utilitarian beast designed to carry tons of frozen fish, not to navigate with the precision of a destroyer. And on this particular night, it is carrying a cargo of chaos. The atmosphere aboard the Refrigerator 13 is the polar opposite of the disciplined quiet of the submarine. The ship is leaving port, but the crew's mind is not on the sea. Reports and investigations would later reveal a staggering lack of professionalism. A significant portion of the crew is heavily intoxicated. The captain, having entrusted the departure to his subordinates, has retreated to his cabin to sleep or pass out. Control of the 5,000-ton vessel falls to the senior mate. Under normal circumstances, a senior mate is fully capable of navigating a ship out of harbor. But these are not normal circumstances. It is the senior mate's birthday. The bridge is less a command center and more a venue for a private celebration. The focus is not on the radar screen or the lookouts, it is on the toast. Driven by a desire to get to open water quickly, perhaps to continue the celebration without the oversight of port control, the senior mate makes a series of fatal decisions. He orders a course change that cuts a corner, deviating from the designated outbound channel. To make matters worse, he decides that the ship's navigation lights interfere with his vision, or perhaps draw too much attention, so he keeps them dimmed or extinguished entirely. He steers the Refrigerator 13 directly into a restricted military zone, a patch of water specifically reserved for naval vessels maneuvering near the base. This is a violation of multiple maritime regulations. It is reckless. It is illegal. But in the Soviet Union of 1981, rules are often flexible if you have the right connections or enough vodka. Violations only matter if someone stops you. And on this night, the port authorities are either not watching closely enough or they assume the cargo ship knows what it is doing. The Refrigerator 13 plows ahead into the darkness, a blind giant stumbling into a minefield. Twilight has settled over the bay, blurring the horizon and making distance difficult to judge. The sea is a shifting canvas of grays and blacks. On the bridge of the Refrigerator 13, the senior mate peers into the gloom. He sees lights ahead. They are low to the water, faint. He assumes, based on his position and his arrogance, that it is a small fishing boat or a tug. The logic of the sea says that tonnage rules. The smaller boat will yield. He does not alter course. He does not sound a warning blast. He holds his line. On the bridge of S-178, the mood shifts from relaxation to sudden alarm. The lookouts spot a dark shape emerging from the background clutter of the city lights. It is huge and it is moving fast. The navigation lights of the incoming ship are confusing, if they are on at all. Captain Marigo realizes the danger instantly. "Hard to starboard," he shouts. "Signal flare, collision alarm." The signalman fires a white flare into the sky, a desperate attempt to say, "We are here." The brilliant magnesium light illuminates the water for a few seconds, revealing the terrifying reality. The bow of the Refrigerator 13 is looming over them like a cliff face. It is not a fishing boat. It is a steel wall moving at 10 knots. The submarine tries to turn. The diesels roar as they are pushed to emergency power. But a submarine on the surface is sluggish. It does not drift like a sports car. It skids like a truck on ice. It is too late. At 1945, the physics of the collision play out. The reinforced ice-breaking bow of the Refrigerator 13 slams into the port side of S-178. It does not glance off. It strikes with the full momentum of 5,000 tons. The impact point is critical, the sixth compartment. This is the electrical motor room. The steel pressure hull, designed to withstand the crushing depth of the ocean, shreds like aluminum foil under the impact of the collision. The noise is deafening, the screech of tearing metal, the boom of the impact, and then the roar of the sea. Water explodes into the sixth compartment. It is not a leak, it is a river. The hole is massive. Within seconds, the compartment is full. The men inside, the electricians, the motor operators do not stand a chance. They are killed instantly by the impact or the violent inrush of water. The buoyancy of the submarine vanishes. With a massive hole in its aft section, S-178 loses its fight with gravity. The stern drops like a stone. The bow pitches up violently, pointing toward the sky for a brief, terrifying moment before sliding backward. The men on the bridge scream as the deck drops out from under them. Within 15 to 20 seconds, less time than it takes to tie a shoe, the submarine disappears beneath the surface. The sea swallows it whole, leaving only swirling foam and the stunned crew of the Refrigerator 13 looking down at the empty water. The violence of the collision throws the 12 men on the bridge into the freezing water. They are the first victims of the night, but also the first survivors. The shock of the cold water hits them like a hammer. The suction of the sinking submarine threatens to drag them down with it. They kick frantically, swimming away from the vortex. In the dark water, amidst the oil and debris, they struggle to stay afloat. Some have been injured by the impact. Captain Marigo is there, treading water, watching his command vanish. The crew of the Refrigerator 13, finally sobered by the catastrophe they caused, throws life rings and lowers boats. They manage to pull 7 men from the water. But for the others, help is too slow. 4 men drown or die of hypothermia before they can be reached. Their bodies drift in the bay, the first casualties of a list that will grow much longer by morning. Meanwhile, inside the submarine, a different kind of horror is unfolding. The collision has shattered the tranquility of the evening routine. The lights flicker and die, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency battle lanterns. The angle of the boat becomes extreme, tipping back, rolling to the side. Men are thrown from their bunks. Equipment tears loose and crashes through the compartments. The sixth compartment is gone. The water pressure blows through the internal bulkheads into the fifth compartment, the diesel engine room, and the fourth compartment, the galley and officers' quarters. Remember the open doors? The convenience of dinner time becomes a death sentence. The water rushes through the open hatches, an unstoppable torrent. In the fifth compartment, the diesel mechanics are overwhelmed. The water rises too fast to fight. In the fourth compartment, men scramble in the dark, trying to find the door handles, fighting the rush of the current. 18 men die in these first few minutes. They die in the dark, trapped in steel boxes that are filling with freezing water. The screams are cut short. The air pockets vanish. But amidst the chaos, one man performs an act that defies the instinct for self-preservation. Valery Zebin is a mechanic. At the moment of impact, he is standing near the hatch between the fourth and third compartments. The explosion of the collision throws him backward. He is dazed, bruised, and terrified. He sees the water rushing toward him from the fourth compartment. It is a wall of black death. His instinct screams at him to run forward, into the third compartment, into the second, to get as far away from the water as possible. But Valery Zebin knows submarine physics. If the water enters the third compartment, the central command post, the entire boat is lost. The batteries are there. If seawater hits the batteries, it creates chlorine gas. Everyone dies. So Valery Zebin does not run. He stands his ground. He grabs the heavy steel wheel of the watertight door. He fights against the rushing air and the spray of water. He slams the heavy door shut. He spins the locking wheel, dogging it down tight. Clang. The sound of the latch engaging is the sound of life. With that single motion, Valery Zebin seals the fate of the men behind him. Anyone still alive in the fourth compartment is now trapped. They are doomed. But by sealing the bulkhead, he saves the third, second, and first compartments. He buys time for the 26 men in the forward section of the boat. He leans against the cold steel of the door, panting, listening to the terrifying sounds from the other side. The pounding, the rushing water. And then, silence. Valery Zebin slides down the bulkhead to the deck. He is shaking. He has just killed his friends to save his shipmates. It is the brutal calculus of the submarine service, executed in a split second of terror. The submarine continues its descent. It hits the bottom with a shuddering crash. It rolls slightly and settles. The silence returns, but it is a heavy, pressurized silence. S-178 is now lying on the floor of the Golden Horn Bay. It is broken, it is flooding, it is dark. But thanks to Valery Zebin, it is not yet a tomb. In the forward compartments, hearts are still beating. The struggle for survival has begun. S-178 lies on the seabed 32 meters below the surface. To a diver, 32 meters is a deep recreational dive, manageable with a single tank of air. But inside a steel hull that has been violently depressurized and flooded, 32 meters feels like the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The submarine sits at a severe list, 32 degrees to starboard. The floor is no longer the floor, it is a steep slope. Walking is impossible. The survivors have to crawl, bracing themselves against pipes and valve wheels to keep from sliding into the bulkheads. The submarine is wounded, perhaps mortally. The sixth compartment is flooded solid. The fifth and fourth are full. The sea is pressing against the bulkhead that Valery Zebin sealed. But the damage is not contained. Water's weeping through cable glands and pipe seals. The pressure hull groans as it settles into the mud. Inside, the environment is rapidly deteriorating. In the second compartment, the battery room, a nightmare scenario begins to unfold. Seawater has mixed with battery acid. The chemical reaction is immediate. Smoke begins to curl up from the deck plates. It is acrid, choking smoke, laced with chlorine gas. Fire breaks out in the electrical panels, sparking and spitting in the dark. The survivors realize they cannot stay there. They have to move. The only safe place left is the first compartment, the torpedo room at the very bow of the ship. It is the furthest point from the impact, the furthest point from the fire. One by one, they scramble through the circular hatch into the first compartment. They are wet, shivering, and terrified. Some are bleeding, some are in shock. They drag the injured with them. Finally, 26 men are gathered in the torpedo room. They seal the hatch behind them, isolating themselves from the fire and gas in the second compartment. They are now trapped in a steel cylinder roughly the size of a school bus, packed with torpedoes, machinery, and 26 breathing bodies. The emergency lighting is dim, a few faint bulbs casting long, dancing shadows. The air is already beginning to feel heavy. The adrenaline of the crash is fading, replaced by the creeping cold of the ocean. The temperature inside the hull drops to match the water outside, about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Condensation begins to form on the walls, dripping onto the men huddled on the deck. They take stock of their situation. They are alive. That is the first miracle. But for how long? They pick up the sound-powered telephone, a rugged, battery-free communication system that connects the compartments. They call out, "Bridge, 4th, 5th, silence." Then a voice answers. It is faint, crackling over the wire. It comes from the 7th compartment, the very stern of the boat behind the flooded 6th. "This is the 7th. We are alive." There are 4 men trapped in the stern. They are isolated, cut off from the main group by the flooded wreckage of the center section. Their situation is desperate. The 7th compartment is the aft torpedo room. It has an emergency escape hatch. The men in the 1st compartment urge them to escape. "Get out! Use the hatch! Don't wait!" The 4 men in the stern try. They wrestle with the heavy steel mechanisms. But something goes wrong. Perhaps the pressure equalization valve is jammed. Perhaps the hull is twisted, binding the hatch. Or perhaps the water rises too fast for them to act. The phone line goes dead. Whatever happened in those final moments in the 7th compartment remains a mystery locked in steel. The water filled their small space. There was no way forward, no way back, and no way up. They drowned alone, listening to the voices of their shipmates fade away. Now, only the 26 men in the 1st compartment remain. The 1st compartment becomes a closed world. It is a microcosm of society stripped down to its rawest elements. There is no rank here, only survival. There is no day or night, only the battery life of the emergency lights. The torpedo room is crowded. The massive shapes of the torpedoes take up most of the space. The men sit on the bunks, on the floor, on the weapons themselves. The air is their most precious resource. A submarine carries oxygen regeneration canisters, chemical plates that absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, but they are limited. Calculations are made. With 26 men breathing, the air will last perhaps 72 hours, maybe less if they panic. Panic burns oxygen. Their only exit is the forward torpedo tubes. These are steel tunnels, 8 meters long and half a meter wide. To escape, a man must crawl inside the tube, close the inner door, flood the tube with freezing water until the pressure equals the sea outside, and then open the outer door. It sounds simple in a manual. In reality, it is a terrifying ordeal. To survive the ascent from 32 meters, they need rescue suits, heavy rubberized suits designed to provide buoyancy and thermal protection. They check the lockers. There are suits, but not enough for everyone. Some are old, some are dry-rotted, and simply floating to the surface is dangerous. A free ascent from that depth expands the air in your lungs. If you hold your breath for even a second on the way up, your lungs will rupture. An embolism will kill you before you break the surface. To do it safely, they need a buoy line. They need to release an emergency buoy to the surface, which carries a cable. Then they can clip onto the cable and ascend slowly, controlling their speed. But they cannot do this alone. They need help from the surface to secure the line. They need the Navy to find them. So they wait. Above them, the rescue operation is chaotic. The alarm has been raised. Ships are converging on the collision site. Searchlights sweep the water. Sonar pings echo through the bay. Sometime during the night, the rescue ships locate the wreck. They can see the emergency buoy that S-178 released. A small boat hooks onto it. They connect a telephone line to the buoy's cable. Inside the submarine, the phone rings. It is a sound that brings tears to the eyes of the hardened sailors. The connection to the world of the living is restored. S-178, this is Rescue Command. Report status. A voice answers from the deep. It is not the captain. The captain is gone. It is not the senior officer. It is Senior Lieutenant Sergei Kubanin. Sergei Kubanin is 27 years old. He is the executive officer of the mechanical division. In the hierarchy of the submarine, he is relatively junior, but in the 1st compartment, he is the highest-ranking officer left alive. Fate has handed him command of a sinking ship. He has no experience with disasters. He has never led a survival situation. But he takes the phone. This is Sergei Kubanin, 26 souls, compartment 1. We have cold, we have darkness, we are waiting. He reports their condition: minimal food, a few cans of condensed milk, some biscuits, insufficient rescue gear, only 20 suits for 26 men. No warm clothing. Most of the men were in their light-duty uniforms when the crash happened. The temperature is dropping. The voice from the surface promises help. Hang on, we are organizing a rescue. We will send divers, we will send supplies. A plan is formed. The rescue ships will lower weighted containers with supplies down the buoy line. The survivors can pull them into the submarine through the torpedo tube. Then a rescue submarine, a specialized deep submergence vehicle, will mate with the S-178's escape hatch, or they will guide the men up the line in groups. It sounds like a solid plan, a Soviet plan, scientific, organized. But the sea has other ideas. The weather above worsens. A storm begins to blow. The waves toss the rescue ships violently. The cable connecting the buoy to the submarine is pulled taut, then slack, then taut again. Inside the submarine, the phone line goes dead. The cable has snapped. The connection is severed. The voice from the surface is gone. The darkness closes in again. Inside the first compartment, the mood shifts from hope to despair. The silence is heavy. The only sound is the breathing of 26 men and the condensation dripping from the ceiling. Breathing is becoming harder. Carbon dioxide is building up. It makes the men drowsy. It gives them splitting headaches. It makes their thoughts sluggish. Fear begins to grow. It is a physical thing, a tightening in the chest. Men start to whisper, "They left us. They can't find us. We're going to die here." Time slows down. Minutes stretch into hours. Every shadow looks like a ghost. Every creak of the hull sounds like the crushing weight of the ocean finally winning. Sergei Kubinin looks at his men. He sees the panic starting to bubble up behind their eyes. He knows that if they panic, they die. If they start fighting, they die. If they give up, they die. He realizes that he is not just the commander of a compartment. He is the guardian of their sanity. He has to do something. He has to give them a reason to keep breathing. But what can he do? He has no food, he has no heat, he has no good news. He looks around the dimly lit room. He sees the faces of boys who should be in university or working on farms, now trapped in a steel tomb. He sees the fear. And then he sees something else. He sees the military insignia on a uniform jacket, the stars on a shoulder board, the badges on a chest. Symbols. In the Soviet Union, symbols matter. Rank matters, structure matters. Sergei Kubinin makes a decision that seems absurd in the face of death. He decides to hold a ceremony. He clears his throat. The sound cuts through the murmuring. "Attention on deck." The men look up, startled. "We are still a crew of the Soviet Navy," Sergei Kubinin says, his voice steady despite the cold. "And we will act like one." He pulls out a notebook. He calls a name. A young sailor stands up, shivering. "Seaman Ivanov, step forward." The boy steps forward. "For exemplary conduct in the face of the enemy. And the ocean is the enemy today. I am promoting you to senior seaman. I am awarding you the qualification of specialist first class." He takes a pen and writes the promotion directly into the sailor's military ID book. He stamps it with the official seal of the submarine, which he recovered from the safe. He calls another name. For bravery, Navy Excellence Badge. He goes through the crew. He hands out promotions. He hands out qualifications. He invents awards. It is theater. It is madness. They are trapped 32 meters underwater, running out of air, and he is handing out paper promotions. But it works. The men straighten up, their eyes clear. They are no longer victims waiting to die. They are specialist first-class sailors. They have been recognized. They have a status. The structure of their world, which was shattered by the collision, is rebuilt inside the compartment. Sergei Kubinin restores order not with a gun, but with a pen. He gives them back their identity. For a while, the panic recedes. They sit in the dark, clutching their ID books, feeling a little less alone. They are a crew again, and a crew can wait. But the air is getting thinner, and the silence from the surface is getting louder. The wait is not over. It is just beginning. This is where the story of S-178 stops being a technical accident report and becomes a study of the human mind under extreme pressure. In the cold, pressurized darkness of the first compartment, the psychology of survival takes over. Disaster strips away the veneer of civilization. It reveals the raw machinery of human behavior. Some men panic, their minds snapping under the weight of the water above them. Some freeze, retreating into a catatonic state where they simply wait for the end. And some, surprisingly, cling to the rules. In a crisis, the familiar becomes a lifeline. The Soviet military system was rigid, bureaucratic, and often dehumanizing. But in the depths of the Golden Horn Bay, that rigidity becomes a strange kind of comfort. When the world is chaos and order is a gift, it tells you what to do when your brain is screaming that there is nothing to do. Sergei Kubinin understands this instinctively. He is young, 27 years old, but he possesses an intuitive grasp of leadership that cannot be taught in a classroom. He realizes that the greatest threat to his men is not just the carbon dioxide or the cold, it is despair. If they believe they are already dead, they will stop fighting. The promotions and awards he handed out were not just paper, they were a psychological anchor. By enforcing the structure of the Navy, he forced the men to remain soldiers. A soldier does not give up. A soldier follows orders. A soldier endures. However, endurance has a physical limit. As the hours drag on, the environment inside the compartment becomes increasingly toxic. The carbon dioxide scrubbers are working, but they are overwhelmed. The headaches are blinding. Men are vomiting. The cold is seeping into their bones, making their teeth chatter uncontrollably. Sergei Kubinin watches them. He knows the theater of discipline will only last so long. They need action. They need to believe that escape is possible. 20 hours pass. 20 hours of sitting in the dark, listening to the hull groan. 20 hours of silence from the surface. Sergei Kubinin makes a decision. They cannot wait for the rescuers to fix the cable. They cannot wait for the perfect plan. They have to try to save themselves. He selects 3 men for the first attempt, 2 officers, Lieutenant Yamkov and the submarine's doctor, Captain Grigoriev, and a civilian specialist named Maltsev, who happened to be on board for the trials. The plan is risky. They will enter the torpedo tube. They will flood it, they will open the outer door, and then they will try to find the buoy line in the pitch-black water and ascend. The men suit up. The rescue suits are bulky, orange rubber contraptions that smell of talcum powder and old rubber. They are clumsy on land, and in the tight confines of a submarine, putting them on is a wrestling match. Hands are shaking, fingers are numb. They crawl into the tube. It is a claustrophobic nightmare. The tube is 533 millimeters wide, about 21 inches. A man in a suit barely fits. He has to shimmy forward, dragging his gear. Once inside, he is trapped in a steel pipe, unable to turn around. The inner door is shut, the water valves are open. Hiss. The freezing seawater floods the tube. It rises around the men's bodies. It fills the space, pressing the suit against their skin. The cold is instant and shocking. They wait for the pressure to equalize. Then the outer door opens. They push themselves out into the abyss. But outside, chaos reigns. The buoy line, their guide to the surface, is tangled. The storm currents whip it around. In the dark, murky water, the men cannot find it, or they lose their grip. They are forced to make a free ascent. They inflate their suits and shoot toward the surface like corks. This is incredibly dangerous. If they ascend too fast, the nitrogen in their blood will bubble out. The bends. If they hold their breath, their lungs will burst. Miraculously, they make it. They break the surface, gasping, bobbing in the rough waves. The searchlights of the rescue ships find them. They are hauled aboard, freezing, exhausted, but alive. Their survival sends a jolt of hope back down to the submarine. The message gets through. It is possible. But the sea is cruel. It gives with one hand and takes with the other. Encouraged by the success, Sergei Kubinin prepares the next group. He selects men who are strong, capable. He sends them into the tube. They launch, and then silence. They do not appear on the surface. They do not return to the submarine. They simply vanish. Did they get disoriented in the dark water and swim sideways instead of up? Did they get snagged on the wreckage of the submarine? Did the nitrogen boil in their veins, killing them before they reached the air? We do not know. The sea keeps its secrets. Back inside the compartment, the mood collapses. The hope that flared up is extinguished. The men look at the torpedo tube, the dark, wet mouth of the tunnel, and they no longer see an exit. They see a mouth that eats people. Fear returns stronger than before. It is not just the fear of death, it is the fear of the unknown. The men start to whisper that the tube is cursed, that the first group was just lucky. Sergei Kubinin feels the control slipping away. He can see it in their eyes, the wild, darting looks of trapped animals. He knows that if he loses them now, he loses them forever. He has to be harder. He has to be the rock they break themselves against. Next group, he barks, suit up, no hesitation. He forces them to move. He forces them to focus on the process, not the outcome. Put on the suit, check the seals, crawl into the tube, step by step. Don't think about the darkness. Don't think about the men who vanished. Just do the next thing. It is a brutal form of leadership. He is sending men into a black hole, not knowing if they will live or die. But he knows that staying is a death sentence. The air is running out. The cold is winning. He is playing a game of Russian roulette with the ocean, feeding it men one by one, hoping that the chamber will be empty for the next click. The psychology of the survivors shifts again. They enter a state of grim fatalism. They stop hoping for rescue and start accepting the process. They move like automatons. They help each other with the suits not out of kindness, but out of necessity. If I help you leave, I am one step closer to leaving. In the darkness of the tube, alone with the freezing water and their own heartbeat, each man faces his own reckoning. Some pray, some scream into their masks, some simply close their eyes and push. This is the reality of survival. It is not glorious, it is not cinematic, it is wet, cold, terrified, and lonely. It is the decision to crawl into a dark pipe because the alternative is to sit in the dark and wait to suffocate. And all the while, Sergei Kubinin watches. He marks the names off his list. He checks the air gauge. He keeps the demons at bay with the sheer force of his will. He is the captain of a sinking world, and he refuses to let it go down without a fight. Nearly 24 hours after the collision, a new player enters the drama. It is the rescue submarine Leonok, Project 940. On paper, this vessel is the pride of the Soviet search and rescue fleet. It is a specialized submarine designed explicitly for this moment. It carries 2 deep submergence rescue vehicles, DSRVs, piggybacked on its hull, capable of mating with a sunken submarine's hatch and transferring survivors dry, without them ever touching the water. It has divers, decompression chambers, and advanced medical facilities. It is the cavalry. But like everything else in this story, the reality of the Leonok falls short of the theory. The rescue submarine arrives on site plagued by its own technical demons. Its sonar system is malfunctioning, leaving it half blind in the murky water. Its batteries are weak, limiting its submerged endurance. The captain of the Leonok is forced to land his massive submarine on the seabed near the wreck, almost blind, relying on crude estimates. And dead reckoning. It is a maneuver fraught with danger. If he lands on the S-178, he could crush the hull and kill everyone instantly. The weather complicates everything. The storm raging above churns the water even at depth, creating currents and poor visibility. The Leonok has to surface frequently to recharge its batteries and fix its navigation systems, breaking the continuity of the operation. After several agonizing attempts, the Leonok manages to settle on the bottom, close to the S-178. Divers are deployed from the rescue sub. They swim through the black water, fighting the currents, dragging heavy hoses and cables. Finally, they reach the S-178. They connect a guideline to the submarine's hull. They bang on the steel plates, a signal to the men inside. We are here. Then they begin to send supplies, not through the hatch. The angle of the wreck makes mating the DSRVs impossible, but through the torpedo tubes. They push waterproof canisters into the tubes from the outside. Inside the first compartment, the survivors hear the clanking. They open the inner door of the tube and pull out the canisters. It feels like Christmas in hell. Inside are fresh rescue suits to replace the rotted ones, flashlights, warm wool clothing, bars of chocolate, and most importantly, written instructions. Put on the suits. Enter the tube 3 at a time. The divers will meet you. They will guide you to the Leonok. Do not inflate your suit. Do not let go of the line. It seems simple. It seems organized. The cavalry has brought a plan. But plans rely on rational actors. And after 30 hours in a freezing, toxic steel box, the men of S-178 are no longer rational. The evacuation begins. The men suit up in the new gear. They crawl into the tubes. Outside, the divers are waiting. They are the gatekeepers. Their job is to grab the survivors as they exit the tube, clip them onto the guideline, and walk them across the seabed to the Leonok. But panic is a powerful drug. As the first men exit the tube, the instinct to survive overrides the instructions. They feel the water around them. They see the faint light of the surface far above, or perhaps just the delusion of it. Up! The human brain screams one command. Up is life, down is death. Some of the sailors fight the divers. They thrash in the water, terrified of the men in black rubber trying to hold them down. They inflate their suits, turning themselves into balloons. They rip the clips off the guideline. They shoot toward the surface. This is exactly what they were told not to do. A rapid ascent from 32 meters is violent. The air in their lungs expands, the nitrogen bubbles in their blood. The divers try to stop them. They grab legs, arms, tanks. It is a wrestling match in the deep. But a panicked man is incredibly strong. Several sailors break free and rocket upward. Some make it to the surface alive, bleeding from the nose and ears, screaming in pain as the bends hit them. They are pulled out of the storm-tossed water by the surface ships. Others are not so lucky. The physics of decompression are unforgiving. Their lungs rupture. They lose consciousness and drown just feet from the air. or the nitrogen blocks the blood flow to their brains, killing them instantly. Down below, the chaos continues. The divers are exhausted. They are fighting a stream of terrified men who seem determined to kill themselves. Inside the torpedo tube, tragedy strikes again. One sailor, crawling through the tube, panics halfway. He feels the crushing weight of the water. He feels the tightness of the suit. He stops. He cannot go forward. He cannot go back. He freezes. The men behind him scream at him to move. They push, but he is a cork in the bottle. He dies there, inside the steel pipe, his heart giving out from sheer terror. Now the tube is blocked. The exit is sealed by a body. Inside the compartment, Sergei Kubinin realizes what has happened. He has to clear the tube. He has to order men to pull their dead shipmate back into the compartment. It is a gruesome, heartbreaking task. They drag the body out, they lay him on the deck, and then the next man has to crawl into the same wet, dark tunnel that just killed his friend. Another sailor, waiting his turn, looks at the tube. He looks at the body. His mind snaps. He decides that the exit is blocked forever. He decides that the divers are lying. He curls up in a corner of the compartment and refuses to move. "It's over," he whispers, "and no way out." He dies there, sitting against the bulkhead, not from lack of air, not from cold, but from the cessation of hope. His heart simply stops. 6 men disappear during the transfer. They are lost in the silt cloud stirred up by the rescue sub. They drift away into the darkness, untethered, unseen. The rescue becomes a battle against biology and fear. It is messy. It is brutal. There is no clean, cinematic transfer of survivors. It is a desperate scramble through the mud and the dark. Sergei Kubinin, still inside the compartment, is managing the collapse. He is losing men. He sees the panic taking hold again. He has to be ruthless. He physically forces men into the suits. He shoves them into the tube. "Go! Don't think, just go!" He is emptying the compartment one by one. The air is foul. The lights are failing. The cold is intense. He knows that every man who leaves is a victory, but he also knows that every man who leaves is one less person to keep him company in the dark. The numbers dwindle. 20 men, 15, 10, 5. The compartment is getting emptier, but it feels heavier. The ghosts of the dead are piling up. The body of the sailor from the tube lies on the deck. The bodies of those who died from the cold are there. Sergei Kubinin is alone with the dead and the dying. He is the last officer. He is the captain of the graveyard. But he keeps working. He keeps the line moving. He is determined that the sea will not take everyone. He will fight for every single life until there is no one left to fight for but himself. And as the last few men crawl into the tube, leaving Sergei Kubinin behind, the silence returns. It is deeper now. It is the silence of the end. The first compartment is almost empty now. The chaotic energy of the evacuation has faded, leaving behind a silence that is heavier than the water pressing against the hull. The survivors have gone, crawling one by one into the steel throat of the torpedo tube. The dead remain. They lie on the deck plates, still in their uniforms, frozen in the positions where the cold or the terror finally took them. Sergei Kubinin is alone. He is 27 years old, but in the last 3 days he has aged a lifetime. His face is gaunt, smeared with oil and grease. His eyes are sunken, red-rimmed from the carbon dioxide and the lack of sleep. His hands shake uncontrollably, not just from the hypothermia that has leached the heat from his core, but from the sheer exhaustion of keeping other men alive. He checks the compartment one last time. It is a habit of command. He shines his dim flashlight into the corners, over the bunks, ensuring no one is hiding. No one is left behind in a stupor of fear. There is no one, only the bodies. He pauses for a moment over them, a silent farewell to the men he could not save. Now he faces his own exit, but there is a problem. The standard procedure for escaping through a torpedo tube requires at least 2 people, one to operate the valves and close the inner door, and one to exit. The last man usually has to rig a complex system to flood the compartment or manipulate the tube from the inside. Sergei Kubinin is too tired for complex rigging. He makes a simpler, more dangerous choice. He decides to flood the entire first compartment. He puts on his rescue suit. It is cold and stiff. He checks the seals. He finds a heavy wrench. He walks to the flood valves of the torpedo tubes. He opens them. Whoosh! The water rushes into the room. It does not come in a trickle. It comes in a torrent. It swirls around his legs, then his waist. It is freezing. Ocean temperature barely above 0. The shock hits him hard, stealing the breath from his lungs. He retreats to the highest point in the compartment, climbing up the torpedo racks. The water rises. It covers the bodies of his shipmates. It extinguishes the last flickering emergency light. Now he is in total darkness. He waits for the water to fill the room completely. He needs the pressure inside to equal the pressure outside. If he tries to open the hatch too soon, the thousands of tons of ocean pressing down will keep it sealed shut. The water reaches the ceiling. He is breathing from the recirculating unit of his rescue suit. The silence is absolute now, broken only by the rasp of his own breath and the bubbling of the air, venting from the suit. He swims to the torpedo tube. He crawls inside. It is tight, slick with grease. He pulls himself forward inch by inch. He reaches the outer door mechanism. He pushes. It opens. Sergei Kubinin spills out into the open ocean. He expects to see divers. He expects to see the lights of the Leonok. He expects hands to grab him and guide him to safety. There is no one. The divers, exhausted by the struggle with the panicked sailors, have retreated. The Leonok has moved or is out of position. The guideline is gone. He is alone on the bottom of the sea. He is disoriented. The darkness is total. Which way is the Leonok? Which way is the shore? He makes a decision. He will not try to find the rescue sub. He will try to find the surface. But he does not shoot up like a cork. He is too weak and his suit is heavy. He starts to crawl. He crawls along the hull of his dead submarine. He feels the steel plates under his gloves. He pulls himself up the sloping deck, hand over hand, fighting the current. He reaches the bow, then the casing. He climbs up toward the bridge, the place where the captain stood 3 days ago. From there, he pushes off. He kicks his legs, heavy as lead. He inflates his suit. He rises. The pressure drops. The water gets lighter. Gray turns to green. He breaks the surface. The air hits his face. It is cold, fresh, salt air. He gasps, spitting out the mouthpiece. He is alive. But he is drifting in a stormy sea, surrounded by ships, but unseen in the waves. He waves his arm. He tries to shout, but his voice is a croak. Finally, a lookout on a rescue ship spots the orange dot bobbing in the swell. A boat is launched. Hands reach down. They pull him from the water. He collapses on the deck of the rescue boat. He is the last man out. The submarine S-178 is now truly a tomb. The rescue operation officially lasts for 2 days, but the aftermath stretches into decades. The final tally is grim. Of the 59 men on board, 27 have survived. 32 are dead. 6 are missing, lost in the water column during the chaotic ascent, their bodies likely carried away by the currents. The survivors are rushed to the hospital in Vladivostok. They are placed in decompression chambers to treat the bends. They are treated for hypothermia, pneumonia, and severe carbon dioxide poisoning. Sergei Kubinin wakes up in a hospital bed. His body is broken, lung barotrauma, damaged eardrums, severe decompression sickness. But his mind is clear. He looks around the room. It is filled with flowers. The news of the disaster, officially suppressed, has leaked to the city. The people of Vladivostok, the families of sailors, the shipyard workers, know what happened. They know that men were trapped down there. Strangers have brought flowers to the survivors. It is a quiet, unauthorized act of solidarity. But the state is less sentimental. Almost immediately, the machinery of the Soviet investigation begins to turn. The KGB and the naval prosecutors arrive at the hospital. They do not bring flowers, they bring notebooks. The case is immediately classified secret. The survivors are ordered not to speak to anyone about the details of the accident. They are told that it is a matter of state security. The investigation that follows is a masterclass in bureaucratic blame shifting. The goal is not necessarily to find the truth. The goal is to find a guilty party who can be punished without indicting. The system itself. The trial is closed. There are no journalists, no public records. The prosecution focuses on the 2 captains. Captain Marigo of the S-178 is accused of violating port regulations. He changed course. He didn't avoid the collision effectively. The fact that he was rammed by a ship that was speeding, dark, and in a restricted zone is considered secondary. He is the captain. He is responsible. The senior mate of the Refrigerator 13, the man who was celebrating his birthday on the bridge, is also charged. His negligence is undeniable. He was drunk. He was speeding. He had no lights. The verdict is handed down. Both men are sentenced to 10 years in prison. It is a convenient solution. 2 men go to Gulag. The case is closed. But the questions remain. Why were the port authorities not charged? They allowed the Refrigerator 13 to leave without proper checks. They allowed a drunk crew to navigate a military harbor. Why was the rescue operation so chaotic? Why did the Leonok have broken sonar? Why were there not enough rescue suits? These questions are never asked in court. To ask them would be to put the Soviet Navy itself on trial. To ask them would be to admit that the closed city of Vladivostok was run with criminal negligence. The families of the dead received modest pensions, a few hundred rubles, a standardized letter expressing regret for the loss of their son in the line of duty. The letter does not mention that their son died because a refrigerator ship cut a corner. It does not mention that he died freezing in the dark because the rescue cable snapped. And what of Sergei Kubinin, the man who held the crew together for 3 days, the man who handed out promotions to stop the panic, the man who flooded the compartment to save himself only after everyone else was gone? The Naval Command is in a difficult position. His heroism is undeniable. The survivors all say the same thing. We are alive because of Sergei Kubinin. A proposal is drafted. He is nominated for the Order of Lenin, the highest civilian award in the Soviet Union, and the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. But the proposal hits a wall in Moscow. The logic of the political officers takes over. How can we give a medal for a disaster? To honor Sergei Kubinin is to draw attention to the accident. If he is a hero, then there must have been a tragedy. And in the Soviet Union, tragedies do not happen. The proposal disappears into a drawer. It is never signed. Instead, Sergei Kubinin is quietly pushed out of the Navy. He is a reminder of something the fleet wants to forget. He is a walking scar. He leaves the service. He recovers from his injuries, though his lungs will never be the same. He eventually finds work in the Ministry of Emergency Situations. It fits him. He is a man who knows how to function when the world is ending. But he never receives his medal. The state decides that silence is better than heroism. The story of S-178 is buried. The files are locked away. The survivors drift apart, carrying their nightmares in secret. The city of Vladivostok goes back to work. The ships keep moving in and out of the harbor, passing over the spot where 32 men died. For 25 years, the incident does not exist. It is a ghost story whispered in kitchens, a rumor among sailors. Do you remember the night the sea closed? But the sea remembers, and the men who crawled out of the tube remember. They wait for the day when they can tell the truth about the captain who went to prison, the mate who was drunk, and the lieutenant who saved them with a pen and a notebook. Years later, halfway across the world, a mirror image of the S-178 disaster occurs. On August 26, 1988, the Peruvian submarine Pacochu is rammed by a Japanese fishing trawler just outside the port of Callao. The circumstances are eerily similar. A collision at twilight, a submarine on the surface, a sudden, violent sinking. The Pacochu goes down in 140 feet of water. Half the crew dies in the initial impact and flooding. But just like in the Sea of Japan, a group of survivors manages to seal themselves in the forward compartment. They are trapped. The air is running out. The pressure is immense. But the aftermath is different. The senior surviving officer on the Pacochu, Lieutenant Roger Katrina, takes command. He keeps the men calm. He organizes their escape. When the rescue forces arrive, he coordinates with them. The survivors conduct a desperate free ascent. 22 men survive. When Roger Katrina reaches the surface, he is not silenced. He is not hidden away in a classified hospital ward. He is celebrated. The Peruvian Navy holds him up as an exemplar of leadership. He is promoted. He is given medals. The story of the Pacochu is taught in naval academies as a lesson in survival and grit. The tragedy is acknowledged, the dead are mourned publicly, and the survivors are allowed to be heroes. Contrast this with the fate of Sergei Kubinin. Sergei Kubinin performed the exact same feat, perhaps under even worse conditions. He held his men together for 3 days, not just a few hours. He invented a psychological structure, the promotions, the awards, to keep them sane. He managed a complex evacuation through a torpedo tube while his own rescue ships were failing him. Yet Sergei Kubinin was warned to stay silent. His career was effectively ended. The proposal for his Hero of the Soviet Union medal vanished into the bureaucratic void. Why? The difference lies not in the men, nor in the ocean. The difference lies in the system. The Peruvian system, imperfect as it might be, could absorb the narrative of a tragedy. It could say, we lost a ship, but we saved the men. The Soviet system could not. For the Soviet leadership, a military disaster was not just a tragedy, it was a political liability. It was a crack in the facade of perfection. To admit that a submarine could be sunk by a drunk fisherman was to admit that the Soviet Navy was vulnerable. To admit that the rescue equipment failed was to admit that Soviet technology was flawed. Therefore, the hero of the story had to be erased along with the villains. Sergei Kubinin was inconvenient. His heroism drew attention to the failure. If he saved them, what did he save them from? He saved them from the incompetence of the state. And that was a story that could not be told. So the two officers, Roger Kotrina and Sergei Kubinin, stand as twin pillars of submarine history, separated by geography and ideology. One stands in the light, a testament to resilience. The other stands in the shadow, a testament to the price of silence. The sinking of S-178 was not an accident in the truest sense of the word. An accident implies an unavoidable twist of fate, a lightning strike, a rogue wave, a hidden flaw in the metal. S-178 did not sink because of fate. It sank because of a cascading series of failures that were built into the system itself. First, there was the failure of traffic control. The fact that a civilian ship, laden with cargo and crewed by intoxicated sailors, was allowed to speed through a restricted military zone at twilight is not a mistake. It is negligence. The port authorities in Vladivostok had created a culture where rules were suggestions. The separation between military and civilian traffic existed on maps, but not in reality. The system relied on luck to keep ships apart, and on October 21st, the luck ran out. Second, there was the failure of enforcement. The Refrigerator 13 had no navigation lights. It was speeding. The senior mate was drunk. In a functioning system, this ship would have been stopped by a patrol boat before it even left the inner harbor. But in the stagnation of the Brezhnev era, the rot had set in. Discipline was lax. Corruption and alcoholism were rampant in the merchant fleet. The system turned a blind eye because stopping the ship would have meant paperwork, delays, and questions. Third, there was the failure of training. The crew of S-178 fought bravely, but they were fighting a scenario they were unprepared for. The rescue suits were old. The escape drills had likely been practiced in calm pools, not in a freezing, pitch-black torpedo room with panic setting in. The sailors who shot to the surface and died of the bends did so because their training collapsed under panic. The system had trained them to operate the machine, but not to survive its destruction. Fourth, there was the failure of rescue. The Leonov rescue submarine arriving with broken sonar and weak batteries is a damning indictment of Soviet maintenance. The rescue fleet, the safety net for the entire Navy, was full of holes. The equipment that was supposed to save lives was itself broken. And finally, there was the failure of accountability. The trial punished the two captains, but it left the port directors, the fleet commanders, and the maintenance officers untouched. By focusing the blame on the individuals at the sharp end of the spear, the system protected its leaders. It ensured that nothing would change. The sea exposed what the system hid. It stripped away the medals, the parades, and the propaganda, revealing the rusted bolts and the drunk sailors underneath. S-178 was a symptom of a superpower that was rotting from the inside out, where the appearance of strength was more important than the reality of competence. S-178 was raised from the seabed within a month of the accident. The operation was swift, driven by the need to clear the harbor and recover the bodies. The submarine was towed to a dry dock. The water was pumped out. The bodies of the men who died in the stern compartments, the ones who never answered the phone, were removed. The submarine itself was damaged beyond repair. The collision had twisted the pressure hull. It was stripped of useful equipment and scrapped. The steel that had been the sailors' home and their prison was melted down, recycled into the economy of the USSR. But one piece remains. In the Morskoye Kladbiще Marine Cemetery in Vladivostok, there is a mass grave. Above it stands a monument. It is the conning tower of a Project 613 submarine. Some sources say it is the actual sail of S-178. Others say it is a replica. It stands stark and gray against the sky, surrounded by the graves of the 32 men who died. Every year on October 21st, a small group of people gathers there. They are older now, gray-haired women who were once young widows. Men in their 60s with scarred lungs who were once boys in a torpedo tube. They bring flowers, they lay carnations on the black granite. They drink a toast of vodka, pouring a little onto the ground for the ones who didn't make it. For decades, they had to mourn in silence. They couldn't tell the full story, but now they talk. They remember the heat of the fire in the second compartment. They remember the sound of the wrench hitting the hull. They remember Sergei Kubinin's voice in the dark. The tragedy did leave a legacy, though it was a quiet one. Years after the accident, the Soviet Navy, and later the Russian Navy, mandated the use of flashing orange navigation lights on surface submarines. If you see a Russian sub on the surface today, you will see that light, a bright, pulsing beacon designed to cut through the fog and the negligence. It is a small change, a technical footnote, but it is written in blood. The legacy also lives in the survivors. Sergei Kubinin eventually received some recognition, though never the full honors he deserved. He lived a quiet life, carrying the weight of the 26 men he saved and the 32 he couldn't. The story of S-178 is not just a story about a submarine crash. It is a warning about the danger of closed systems. When an organization, whether it is a navy, a corporation, or a government, cannot admit its mistakes, it creates a debt. That debt is paid in lives. The system tried to close the book on S-178. It locked the files and silenced the witnesses. It wanted the night of October 21st to be forgotten. But you cannot silence a disaster of this magnitude. The truth acts like a bubble of air released from the deep. It rises. It may take time. It may have to fight through layers of pressure and darkness, but eventually it breaks the surface. S-178 is no longer just a wreck on a chart. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming institutional failure. It reminds us that even in the darkest, coldest place on Earth, inside a flooded tube at the bottom of the sea, there is still courage. There is still a man with a notebook, giving names to the frightened, refusing to let the darkness win. The story of S-178 ends with a silence that is different from the one that began it. The initial silence was one of deception, the quiet complacency of a port that believed it was safe, the hushed secrecy of a military state that hid its flaws. The final silence, however, is one of memory. It is the silence that falls over the cemetery in Vladivostok when the wind dies down, leaving only the rustle of dry leaves against the granite headstones. But between these two silences lies a profound lesson about the nature of survival and the cost of hubris. When we look back at the tragedy of October 21st, 1981, it is tempting to focus on the mechanics of the disaster. We can trace the path of the refrigerator 13, calculate the speed of the impact, and analyze the physics of the flooding. We can diagram the torpedo tubes and measure the air capacity of the first compartment. These technical details provide the how of the disaster, but the why is far more uncomfortable. S-178 did not sink because of a mechanical failure. The submarine itself performed exactly as designed. The watertight doors held when they were closed. The emergency buoys released. The hull endured the impact better than anyone could have expected. The machine did not fail the men. The men, or rather the institutions that govern them, failed the machine. This disaster is a case study in what sociologists call normalization of deviance. This occurs when a group of people slowly, over time, accepts risky behavior as normal because nothing bad has happened yet. The port authorities in Vladivostok had normalized the mixing of military and civilian traffic in restricted zones. The captains had normalized the practice of leaving watertight doors open while transiting. The rescue services had normalized the state of disrepair of their equipment. Every day that passed without an accident reinforced the belief that the risks were manageable. They were playing a game of chance, but they had convinced themselves it was a game of skill. Then, on one Tuesday night, the variables aligned perfectly: a birthday celebration, a darkened ship, a moment of inattention, and the illusion of safety shattered instantly. The aftermath of the sinking reveals an even darker truth about the Soviet system of that era: the prioritization of the state's image over the individual's value. In a transparent society, the S-178 disaster would have triggered a public inquiry. Heads would have rolled at the top of the Pacific Fleet. Procedures would have been overhauled. The heroism of Sergei Kubinin would have been broadcast on national television as an example of the Soviet spirit. Instead, the response was containment. The state treated the accident like a virus that needed to be quarantined. By imprisoning the captains and silencing the survivors, the system protected itself from criticism. It effectively said, the problem is not the Navy, the problem is these specific individuals. This refusal to learn from failure is dangerous. A military that cannot admit its mistakes is a military that cannot improve. By burying the lessons of S-178, the Soviet Navy ensured that similar accidents would remain possible. The culture of secrecy didn't make them safer, it made them brittle. However, amidst this systemic bleakness, the human element shines with an unbearable brightness. The story of S-178 is ultimately a testament to the resilience of the human mind. Consider Valery Zebin, the mechanic who closed the hatch. In a split second, amidst the roar of incoming water, he made a decision that doomed his friends in the fourth compartment but saved everyone else. That is a burden he carried for the rest of his life. It is the terrible arithmetic of command exercised by a young sailor in a flooding corridor. Consider the men in the first compartment. Stripped of light, heat, and hope, they could have turned on each other. They could have descended into anarchy. Instead, under Sergei Kubinin's guidance, they rebuilt their society. They clung to their identity as sailors. They found dignity in the ritual of promotions and orders. They proved that even when the body is trapped, the mind can remain free. And consider Sergei Kubinin himself. He was not a superhero. He was a junior officer who was terrified. But he understood that leadership is not about knowing the answer. It is about pretending you know the answer long enough for the panic to subside. He saved his men by giving them a future to look forward to, even if that future was just the next 5 minutes. The sinking of S-178 serves as a grim mirror to later disasters, most notably the Kursk tragedy in 2000. In both cases, men were trapped alive on the seabed. In both cases, the initial official response was confusion and denial. In both cases, the rescue infrastructure proved inadequate. But there is a key difference. The men of the Kursk died waiting. The men of S-178, at least 26 of them, decided not to wait. They took their fate into their own hands. They crawled into the tube. They chose action over passivity. This is the enduring legacy of the incident. It teaches us that when the system fails, the individual must step up. When the rescue ship doesn't come, you have to rescue yourself. Today, the Golden Horn Bay is still busy. The city of Vladivostok has changed. It is open to the world now. The secrets of the closed city are largely gone. But the water remains the same. It is still cold, still dark, and still indifferent. The monument to S-178 stands as a reminder that the price of safety is eternal vigilance. It warns us against the complacency of routine. It warns us that rules written in blood should not be erased by convenience. As we leave the story of S-178, we are left with the image of Sergei Kubinin floating alone in the stormy sea, the last man out of a steel tomb. He is a symbol of survival against the odds, but he's also a symbol of the cost. He survived, but he left part of himself down there in the dark with the men who never answered the phone. The submarine sank in seconds. The truth took decades to surface. But now that it is here, we must look at it directly. We must honor the dead not just with flowers, but with the truth. They did not die for a cause. They died because of a mistake. And the only way to give meaning to their death is to ensure that the mistake is never repeated. Some disasters fade into history, becoming dry footnotes in naval textbooks. S-178 refuses to fade. It remains a visceral, terrifying, and deeply human story. It is the story of the night the sea closed and the men who found the strength to pry it back open, 1 inch at a time. Thank you for spending part of your day with us to remember these men. If this journey into the deep meant something to you, we'd be honored to have you with us again. Until next time, stay curious and take good care.